What is up, Slackers, and welcome to Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast. Well, this week isn't the Gen X podcast. Instead, this is the first of perhaps many Stuck in the Middle movie reviews. So I am your host, Jason Eck, and as I mentioned on last week's episode, which you can go ahead and check out wherever you get your podcasts, where I kind of gave a detailed synopsis of my history with the character of Superman. So you can go back and listen to the full episode, but in general terms, I am 51 years old and I have been reading Superman comics as well as all of the various live action animated, basically all the media that is Superman since the late 1970s. And I've seen most of the iterations. I say most because there's one movie that I still don't think I've ever seen, and it doesn't really matter because ultimately what matters is what I got to see this past Friday, July 11th, in IMAX 3D, the James Gunn written and directed Superman, the first major entry in the new DC universe. The first real installment was Creature Commandos, which you can see on Max, which was excellent. They have retconned the first season of Peacemaker, where it does align with the new continuity. But nevertheless, this is a character that I would continue to be, I consider to be in my big three. Now, my first two are pretty common, and I mentioned this on the podcast last week. Superman and Spider-Man were clearly my guys in the late 70s and early 80s. And then my own kind of guilty pleasure, if you will, is the character Firestorm. Those were my big three. And Superman is just near and dear to my heart. And that really is something that has remained regardless of all the scuttlebutt and all the ridiculousness that is social media and people who are digging their heels in about what iteration of Superman they prefer. So here's one thing that you're going to know as we get into kind of my thoughts of the movie. We're not going to talk about the Snyderverse. Why? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter any more than it matters of whether you prefer Tobey Maguire to Andrew Garfield or Tom Holland. Hell, I go back to the TV show. I don't even remember the name of the actor, the live action Spider-Man that played in the 70s. I think it was the late 70s. It doesn't matter because all of these characters that have been with us for so long have seen so many different incarnations, whether it's Keaton to Val Kilmer to George Clooney to Christian Bale, and now we have Robert Pattinson. I mean, that's okay. It's okay to have these different iterations. And I don't know why anyone would dig their heels in and say, this is my only view of this character. That's like saying when Kurt Swan became the artist for Superman and Wayne Boring was over there going, hey, that's not fair. Or how Kurt Swan gave way to a John Byrne. This happens. There's different creative people involved with all of these characters. I mean, you think about it, the big change for Spider-Man was some guy named Todd McFarlane came along with a completely different artistic style. That's cool. Well, it's no different in film. And for someone who remembers clearly as a kid, not only Christopher Reeve as Superman in 1978, Richard Donner, but also I watched a lot of rerun television. And that goes back to the black and white George Reeves Superman, who also made a tremendous cameo of I Love Lucy. So again, dating myself as far as the reruns that were on every day, but I Love Lucy was a huge part of my childhood in watching it on a little tiny black and white television. So I just enjoy the character. I just enjoy the character of Superman. And people have a lot of different takes on the character, and that's what's most critical to me. So regardless of how you feel about, you prefer Henry Cavill, by the way, love Henry Cavill. I will say that Liam Hemsworth has some big boots to fill in the upcoming season of The Witcher as Geralt of Rivia. Again, different iterations of the same character. So let's get into the movie itself. So first and foremost, again, you might have seen on social media, everyone wants to make everything. It could be a hamburger or a teddy bear, and someone's got a political position that they want to foist upon the world. Okay? I don't see the Superman movie in any way, shape, or form of taking any particular stance one way or another. Now, the writer and the director, he might have a political stance. I'm sure that he does. And they did make a bunch of comments, during the premiere time. That's fine. They're free to believe what it is that they want to believe. But ultimately, when I sit down to watch the movie, I don't really see what anyone is reading into about any kind of political agenda. So without giving any major spoilers away, I'm going to do my best not to do that. Let's just say there's a military conflict where a much larger, heavily militarized country wants to invade a smaller, less militarized, capable country. Take it over for resources, land, etc. Just so you know, regardless of your politics, this has been happening in film, not just comic book movies, but all manner of cinema since always. Like, that whole concept is not something novel or new. This is just a kind of story of mankind. That's really all there is to it. So people who are trying to make parallels between who the bad guys are, well, who are their real world counterparts? Are we talking about Russia? Are we talking about Israel? Who are we talking about? Doesn't matter. It's a conflict that exists, and there's storyline reason for it to exist. But if you're looking to take away some major political message from Superman, I think you've come to the wrong place. So anyway, let's jump right into my thoughts of the movie itself. So first and foremost, the last time I did a movie review was something like 1987 for the middle school newspaper with my buddy Justin, and we did our review of Summer School, which is a classic, by the way. Go check it out. Anyway, I'm not a filmmaker. I'm just going in because I want to go see a movie. Most of my movie choices tend to be what some would consider to be lowbrow. I like things that go boom. I don't know what to tell you. A lot of the movies in the 80s, things blew up. Those were some of our heroes, whether it was Schwarzenegger or Stallone or Van Damme. We loved those action flicks. Bruce Willis. So I sit down, here I am, I'm ready to see some escapism and this reset of the DC universe. And I will say, again, without giving away any kind of spoilers, some of the stuff I'm sure you've already seen online, but if you actively have done like I have, which is on X, I went ahead and I muted Superman and James Gunn and every single keyword that I can think of because I didn't want to have anything spoiled. I didn't want anything that hadn't already been shown in some of the previews and the clips. Avoided all of it until I got to see the movie. So if you are concerned in any way that there's going to be a spoiler, I said I'm going to do my best. Hey, end this video now. That's completely okay. So you have the opening. And again, I saw it in 3D. I don't always see movies in 3D. In fact, I rarely do. Man of Steel I did see in 3D because I think the spectacle of Superman is worthy of that, to really be immersed in the action and the experience. But they did something that was pretty clever, pretty simple, and other filmmakers have done it before with great success, which is world building in just a couple of frames, telling you the who, what, when, where, not quite telling you the how, because you're going to see that shortly, but really establishing what is the universe that you're about to drop into. So you don't need a ton of additional backstory. And all of us know the story of Superman. So you don't need to do a whole rehash of the origin story. That's going to have its own part in the movie itself anyway, but nevertheless, you jump right in, firmly established of what this world is actually all about. And it fills in a lot of the blanks for people who are, oh, what's the canon? And what exactly is happening here? What universe is this? What Earth is this? It just tells you, here we are. And it's a perfect setup for what you're about to see. I will say the visuals, first and foremost, I thought they were stunning. So you might have seen online where people are taking still frames of something that's happening in very fast speed, okay? If you want to take something frame by frame, you're always going to see holes in CGI, but taken as a whole experience in 3D and IMAX, breathtaking visuals. breathtaking visuals without a doubt. And if for no other reason, the movie's a success because Superman has a crazy power set and they were all on full display in really wonderful ways. And everything from flight to heat vision, super breath, the whole 9 yards, it's there. And it's absolutely great. So why don't we get into the cast real quick? I mean, the casting is excellent. Absolutely excellent. So, of course, David Corenswet really has three characters, if you think about it. And I talked about that in the podcast as well. You have Clark Kent, you have Kal-El, and you have Superman. And there's this kind of overlap between all three characters, but really, particularly if you've read the comics, they're kind of distinct individuals in a way, with ultimately the core of the character, I think, truly having always been Clark Kent, and I think that was embodied here beautifully. Rachel Brosnahan as the erstwhile reporter Lois Lane. She's tough and she is like off the comics page. Looks exactly as you would imagine Lois Lane. And I didn't think that you could get any better than Margot Kidder's iteration of it. Noelle Neal back on the old Superman serial. They all looked like the Lois Lanes of their era as far as the comics go. Rachel Brosnahan was excellent. I think ultimately the best casting, and one that is going to be talked about in the future as far as villainous characterizations, actors who really nailed the role. You have Nicholas Hoult as Alexander Lex Luthor. Yes, his full name is Alexander. Tremendous. And you may have seen some of the social media discourse that he is just a hater. He is absolutely just a hater and wears it on his sleeve, kind of with pride. Excellent. A bit of casting that had some mixed reactions online. I was never in doubt because I've watched this guy's whole career. The only thing I haven't really watched is his newest television series. I'm talking about Nathan Fillion. I remember first seeing him, I believe, on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then obviously his turn in Firefly, Captain Mal, as Guy Gardner, Green Lantern. Now, Guy Gardner, if you are of my age, coming off of Crisis on Infinite Earths in the comics, Guy was introduced really at this time. I am just super stoked to see his interactions with other heroes of this world. We do get a little bit of that along with his compadres in the the Justice Gang. You have Isabella Merced as Kendra Saunders, Hawkgirl, and Eddie Ketheji as Michael Holt, Mr. Terrific. I'm wondering again if you're talking about the lore, if they are going to somehow talk about the different Earths, because anyone who knows that Michael Holt started off on a different Earth, but again, that's comic lore, and that may have been retconned 100 times. The last time I was really paying attention to DC Comics was during the New 52, right through about Rebirth, but I haven't kept on it since then. You have Anthony Kerrigan as Rex Mason, a.k.a. Metamorpho, a.k.a. the Element Man. You have Maria Gabriela de Faria as Angelica Spica, the Engineer. Again, I think great casting. Those of you who are really into the Authority might have different opinions. I felt for what she was doing and what she was meant to represent, she was excellent. Skylar Gisondo as Jimmy Olsen. Great job as Jimmy, who really hasn't gotten enough love on the big screen, in my opinion. Wendell Pierce as Perry White. Great. Absolutely great. He's a tremendous actor anyway. Didn't have a ton to do in this particular movie, but Perry's always kind of gruff, and he captured that very, very well. You have Sarah Sampaio as Eve Tessmacher, which you may remember from, the Superman comics back in the day, or I should say, the Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner introduced us to Eve Tessmacher. Great job here. No spoilers, but a significant part of the movie that may not be evident when you first start seeing the trailers and those kind of things. Pruitt Taylor Vince as Jonathan Kent. You have Neva Howell as Martha Kent. I know some people have gone to the social media to talk about like whether their accent is accurate to rural Kansas. I will tell you this, there are many Midwestern states where people will tell you they don't have an accent until you meet people from rural areas. And I've met a lot of people in states that claim they don't have that kind of drawl. And then you find out that some folks do. So I can't say one way or another, but I thought they were excellent as small farm town folks, good old Smallville out on the Kent farm. Sean Gunn as Maxwell Lord. That character has a lot to do with Justice League and Justice League International. Alan Tudyk as Superman Robot 4. And then I'm going to leave off, if you've avoided things, there's a couple of cameos that I'm just going to leave where they are. Let's just say there's members of the L family that do come into play, and a couple of them were never discussed as being part of the cast. Let's just say there are some frequent collaborators of Mr. Gunn that do show up. And then you have Frank Grillo as Rick Flag Sr. This is reprising his role from the voice acting role that he did on Creature Commandos. He's great. Michaela Hoover as Cat Grant. Beck Bennett as Steve Lombard. Doesn't have a ton to do here, but a little bit of, I guess, comic relief. And then, of course, you have Krypto, the Superdog. So let me just say this. Anyone who goes into a Superman movie in any way decrying the presence of Krypto is ignoring decades of Superman lore. Krypto is a beloved character. And in fact, I would say that some of the stuff that happened post-Crisis that took away a lot of the preceding decades of Superman lore, kind of took it all away, including Supergirl. It's nice to kind of get back to the core of the character, which is ultimately a mixture of science fiction, which you get in droves in this movie. You have the embodiment of faith and hope and goodness and the nature of humanity, which has always been a critical aspect of Superman. I mean, that's the character. Any attempts at darkening him purposely and still calling it Superman, I think falls short, because you have plenty of other analogs for Superman, particularly in multiversal stories where you have like an Ultraman of Earth 3 who's extreme evil. Of course, the Injustice series, where a good Superman then goes bad due to a traumatic series of events. It's been done. So why not bring Superman in a time that we all live in, that has so much cynicism, that has so much negativity and anger, obviously evidenced just by how people are talking about this movie, with preconceived ideas or some notion that some earlier version of Superman is supposed to be the one. Well, I will say this. David Cornsweet has given you the kind of Superman that we haven't seen. Tyler Hoechlin has done a nice job with that, kind of the aw shucks Superman, but he's playing a little bit older Superman. So here you have a young superhero, only a few years into his career, with these immense powers, and trying to figure out if the decisions that he makes are good ones or bad ones. And I think that is the whole theme of the movie, is how can you be heroic when there is the potential for people to be harmed? And that's a hard thing to reckon. And it's been fodder for comic books, not just DC, but I think across all comic books, of the fallout of the decisions that superheroes have in the action of saving a city, for example. And instead, you're seeing a Superman who's going out of his way to save all manner of life, including space beasts and squirrels and dogs and just everyone, and even trying to find ways to get to common ground with the bad guys too. He doesn't want to hurt anyone, recognizing his own power. There's like nobody stronger, right? Here's a guy who's constantly pulling his punches with everything that he does. You don't want Superman who goes full bore, full strength all the time. That's a catastrophe. And I think that this movie and James Gunn's direction and writing really captured what makes Superman, Superman. This absolute belief in the inherent goodness of people, despite all the evidence To the contrary, that he would have seen in the commissioning of his duties, seeing evil people do evil things. And even then, he doesn't necessarily believe that they should just be, struck down with a simple flick of his finger, which he could do. Instead, he's always showing some level of compassion and understanding, which I think is a reasonable thing, particularly when you have some interactions with the Kents. Again, this isn't a spoiler, of just trying to help him reconcile how it is that they raised him, and the decisions that he makes are his own. And sometimes you're going to screw up. Kind of a simple parenting story, too. And of course, we get into a lot of the whole nature versus nurture and all of the things that some people have latched onto, of saying there's a political component to all of that. And again, it's not. It's just humanity. And that's what is the recurring theme over and over and over again, is this man from another world understands the core of humanity sometimes better than the humans do. I think in part because he recognizes that he is from another planet. And if you did any kind of juxtaposition in the cultures of Krypton and Earth, well, they're like night and day. And that's something that's also talked about in the movie, again, without giving anything major away. Beautifully shot, beautifully acted. There is some laugh out loud humor, some things that take you by surprise. Excuse me. I think that the 3D environment, I would recommend going to see it in 3D if you're good with 3D. Some people aren't. I know some people get headaches or dizzy or whatever it is, but oh man, I was completely immersed, and cinematography was beautiful. I mean, each of the characters felt fully realized without necessarily digging too deeply into their backstory. You do have to take a lot on just presentation to fill in the blanks. So if you're not familiar with some of these characters, you might be like, oh, well, I don't really get it. What is a Green Lantern? And who is this guy? Well, what's a Hawk Girl? Mr. Terrific, what's he all about? But it kind of falls into place anyway. So I think that you could come into the story without really knowing anything about the characters and still kind of go, oh yeah, I get it now. I get it. Some of the things that occurred might seem out of character in some iterations of the characters, but I think ultimately they captured everyone kind of how you'd anticipate them to be. And I think that's what was really great. Some low-key kind of funny stuff with Jimmy Olsen, which shouldn't be a surprise, but if you go back and looked at the history of DC Comics lore, Jimmy Olsen has had a whole bunch of different lives and been through a whole lot of different stuff just by virtue of being Superman's best pal, Jimmy Olsen. So really cool that he got an opportunity to shine, because that to me, again, strikes into the whole background of Superman. Special effects, I hit on that. The script is good. The actors were excellent. I do think that Nathan Fillion was a real treat. Eddie Gathegi was awesome as well. But, really, so was Metamorpho. I think the person who got the least work on character was probably Hawkgirl. They probably could have done a little bit better job than that. But that's a minor gripe in the grand scheme of things. You have Rachel Brosnahan embodying Lois Lane, and their interaction is fantastic. You can feel the chemistry coming off of them. And when you see them, knowing the future, if they stick to continuity and what we establish as DC lore, you know that these two people fully love each other and are going to be together. And that comes off the page or the screen, if you will. It's really evident. And that's where having the two right actors with the right chemistry goes such a long way in the romantic element. So that's the whole thing. It's action. It's sci-fi. It's got some political intrigue. It's got intergalactic imps or interdimensional imps. It's got kaijus. It's got clones. It's got superpowered animals. I mean, it runs the gamut of everything that you could hope to see in a Superman movie. I mean, that's the gist of it. So me personally, as someone who has been following this character in one way or another since the 1970s, will say that this is one of the best. I'm not doing a ranking today, So maybe I'll drop another video episode because I don't do video episodes very often. So those of you who are listening to the audio only, you can go check me out over on YouTube, or if you're watching it here on YouTube, I may do kind of a ranking of the live action Superman. Actually, let me know if you would like to hear more movie reviews or ranking. Let's do some tier lists. Let me know. You can do that in the comments. You can also go ahead and reach out to me via email or head over to socials, where you can find me on most platforms at StuckPodX, with the exception of Facebook, which is Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast page. So I think that this movie, if I'm going to put it on a 5-star rating, which is typically what it is, I was gonna try to be cool and be like, oh, well, I'm gonna give it a 4.5 or 4.75. It's a 5. I loved it. I absolutely enjoyed it. I never buy merch. Oh, I was gonna bring it down and show. I never buy merch when I go to the movie theater. I'm like, you give me that cup, you give me that popcorn bucket, which is a Daily Planet newspaper, the little kiosk where you can go and pick up a newspaper. That was your popcorn bucket. It was tremendous. I don't even eat popcorn. I just bought it and said, because my wife and kids were going to get popcorn anyway. Like, I'm getting that bucket. I'm getting that cup. I want it. The cup came with a Superman keychain. But again, maybe it's because when Man of Steel came out, I don't think there was a popcorn bucket thing. Like, that wasn't a thing yet. But this is the first time I've done it since that's become kind of routine, where there's going to be a major release with a major popcorn bucket. I'm like, I need to have it. It was excellent. So at some point when I redo this space down here to be a little bit better for video presentations, you're going to see that up on a shelf behind me, because it was awesome. So forget all the scuttlebutt. Everyone has an opinion. You might share my opinion that this was 5 stars. Fun, worth the money, sets up this universe, just a popcorn film with enough emotional resonance to give it that little something else that I think is almost required nowadays. There has to be some element of peril for your hero, whatever it is. You might disagree, but I know for what I went and saw, as a lifelong Superman fan, this is 5 stars and one of the best presentations of Superman on the big screen, period. And that's no shade at anyone else. Simply, this movie, in and of itself, meets the criteria of a great Superman film. So, new episode of the podcast will drop on Wednesday, as always. So, if you'd like to hear more reviews, want me to do video stuff more often, please, again, let me know in the comments, or go ahead and subscribe to the podcast and the channel, which should have some more video drops sooner or later. All right. Until next time. Later, slackers.